There comes a moment in every life when the truth begins to rise quietly, unmistakably from beneath the surface. A moment when something inside you whispers, "You didn't choose this reality. It chose you." Most people silence that voice. But you didn't arrive here by accident. You clicked because a part of you already knows. Your life has not been shaped by your thoughts, your affirmations, or even your intentions. It's been shaped by something deeper, older, something running beneath awareness, like a hidden operating system governing every outcome. And here's the part most people never expect. That mechanism isn't mystical, it isn't random, and it isn't beyond your reach. It's internal, precise, measurable. And it's been influencing your reality without your conscious consent. Imagine walking through a house where the lights turn on before you touch the switch. At first, it feels like magic, until you realize there's a sensor detecting your presence and deciding for you. That's how manifestation works for most people. They believe they're choosing their reality consciously, while an internal switch, buried beneath awareness, is choosing for them. It's not your desire that signals the quantum field. Not your vision board. Not your morning routine. It's the state your body automatically returns to. The state you broadcast 24/7, whether you're aware of it or not. And here's the paradox most spiritual teachings avoid. The quantum responds to your dominant vibration, not your preferred one. Which means the life you're living isn't a reflection of your goals. It's a reflection of your internal baseline. This is uncomfortable and liberating. If manifestation were about wanting, everyone on earth would be living in abundance, love, clarity, and purpose. But wanting does nothing to the field. The quantum doesn't speak in words. It speaks in coherence. It reads the electromagnetic signature you emit, and that signature is shaped by the one thing most people never examine, your internal state. Not the state you create during meditation or journaling, but the state you return to when your mind wanders. The state your nervous system memorized years ago. The state your subconscious replays without asking your permission. That is the switch. And that's why reality can feel like déjà vu. Like a loop. Like a movie you've watched too many times. Now the science becomes impossible to ignore. In quantum mechanics, a system collapses into a specific outcome when the observer interacts with it. But the observer isn't just your conscious mind. The observer is the totality of your internal state, your patterns, emotions, memories, body chemistry, and identity. Which means you've been collapsing timelines not with what you think, but with who you're being. And because identity is a feedback loop, your body keeps pulling you back to the same vibrational signature you've carried for years. You may say, "I am abundant," while your body whispers, "I am unsafe." You may visualize love, while your nervous system broadcasts fear. And the field responds to the louder signal. The consistent one. The embodied one. This is why people feel stuck, even when they're doing everything right. They're flipping the wrong switch. But this isn't where the story ends. This is where the door opens. Because the moment you realize the quantum responds not to surface intention, but to internal coherence, everything changes. You stop fighting reality. You stop forcing outcomes. You start tuning the signal that creates them. Because manifestation was never about effort. It was always about alignment. And alignment isn't something you think your way into. It's something you embody. The switch is internal. And the moment you flip it, reality rearranges, without resistance, without force, and without delay. Before we go deeper, sit with this for a moment. There is a version of you that has already flipped this switch. A version of you that moves through life with clarity, coherence, and a signal strong enough to bend probability. You feel flashes of that version sometimes, in dreams, in intuition, in moments when time feels thinner. Those glimpses are not fantasies. They're leaks in the timeline, reminders of the identity you're meant to step into. And if you feel something stirring in you right now, that's not emotion. That's recognition. Something inside you knows exactly what I'm talking about, even if your mind doesn't fully understand it yet. This is the part where most people pull back, where they try to reason their way through the mystery. But if you stay with me, you're going to see the mechanism clearly. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because in a moment, I'm going to reveal the one internal shift that makes quantum manifestation work automatically. Not gradually, automatically. But we need to go one layer deeper first. We need to expose the hidden pattern that has been choosing your reality in the background. The pattern your conscious mind keeps trying to override but never fully understands. And once we expose it, everything else will fall into place. There is a moment in every transformation when a person realizes that what they've been trying to change on the outside was never the source of the problem. People change their habits, their routines, their goals, their strategies, but nothing truly shifts because the underlying signal remains untouched. In the quantum world, signals matter more than actions. Frequencies speak louder than intentions. And your internal state, the one that keeps pulling you back into familiar emotions and familiar outcomes, is the real command center of your reality. The reason quantum manifestation feels inconsistent for most people is not because they lack clarity or discipline. It's because they haven't learned how the internal switch operates, or even where it lives. They try to change their life from the surface while the field is responding to a deeper layer they never address. Science has been pointing to this for decades, but most people miss the implications. Your nervous system broadcasts electromagnetic patterns into the environment. Your heart generates a field measurable several feet beyond your body. Your brain synchronizes its electrical rhythms based on emotional memory and habitual thought loops. Every moment of your life, these systems are forming a single unified signal, a vibrational signature that interacts with the quantum field. And here is the twist that completely overturns conventional manifestation teachings. This signature is not determined by your conscious desires. It is determined by the emotional baseline that your body has memorized. Meaning, you are not sending out the signal of what you want. You are sending out the signal of what you consistently feel. If your body has memorized survival, the field receives survival. If your body has memorized fear, the field receives fear. If your body has memorized expansion, coherence, openness, the field receives that. This is the internal switch. But what exactly is it? The switch is the state of coherence between your mind, your emotions, your identity, and your nervous system. When these components are misaligned, your signal becomes fragmented, and the field mirrors that fragmentation back to you. That's why people say, "I'm thinking positive but nothing changes." They don't realize that the internal switch is stuck in the old position, locked into the state they've carried for years. Their mind says abundance, but their body says threat. Their mind says love, but their heart says guard yourself. Their mind says new reality, but their identity says I'm not ready. The quantum doesn't collapse according to the loudest thought. It collapses according to the most coherent state. And coherence only appears when thought, emotion, belief, and biology are vibrating in the same direction. This is where the spiritual and the scientific meet. Neville Goddard said that you must feel the state of the wish fulfilled. Joe Dispenza teaches that your emotions broadcast your electromagnetic signature. Quantum physics shows that observation collapses probability. These teachings are not separate. They are different angles of the same truth. The internal switch is the point where feeling, identity, and observation fuse into a coherent frequency. When the switch is flipped, you stop sending mixed messages to the field. Your signal becomes unified. And a unified signal creates rapid manifestation, because the field no longer has to guess what timeline you're aligning with. It receives a clear command. But here is the part nobody tells you. This switch does not change through force. You cannot bully your nervous system into abundance or intimidate your heart into coherence. You cannot fake a frequency by repeating words your body does not believe. The quantum field is not tricked by verbal affirmations or mental images if the underlying state contradicts them. The field reads emotional truth. It reads embodied belief. It reads the internal landscape, not the external performance. And this is why people get stuck. They keep addressing the symptoms of misalignment instead of addressing the switch that controls the entire frequency. Let's make this concrete. Think of your internal state as the tuning dial on a radio. You can scream "play jazz" at the radio all day, but unless you change the frequency, the station will not shift. Your internal switch is the frequency selector of your reality. Your thoughts may say one thing, but if your internal dial is still set to the old station, the broadcast does not change, and your lived reality remains a perfect mirror of that internal dial. Most people try to change their station by thinking harder, visualizing longer, or hopping more intensely. But the dial doesn't move, because it's not controlled by conscious effort. It's controlled by emotional signal, embodied identity, and coherence. This explains why you can have moments of clarity or alignment where manifestation feels easy, almost automatic. In those moments, your switch flipped without you understanding how. Maybe you felt grateful, open, expanded, deeply present, or fully connected with yourself. In those states, your mind and body were in harmony. Your heart and brain were synchronized. Your identity softened. Your energy field expanded. And for a brief moment, your signal was coherent. That coherence is what the quantum field responds to, because coherence is order, and order collapses probability into form with precision. But the problem is that most people return to their old emotional baseline within minutes, not because they want to, but because the nervous system is addicted to familiar emotions. The body craves what is predictable, even if it's painful. Fear is familiar. Doubt is familiar. Self-sabotage is familiar. Survival is familiar. And the internal switch always defaults to what is familiar. That's the mechanism that has been shaping your life without your permission. It's not your wishes. It's not your goals. It's not your dreams. It's the emotional past stored in your body, repeatedly chosen by your nervous system and sent into the field as your dominant signal. And until that switch is flipped intentionally, the loop continues. But the good news is this: once you become aware of the switch, you can change it. Not with effort, but with alignment. Not with desire, but with embodiment. In the next part, we're going to explore why the old identity keeps pulling you back into the same frequency, the same outcomes, and the same version of yourself. And once you understand that, you'll finally know how to stop sending a signal you never consciously chose. Something strange happens inside you every time you try to change your life. A silent resistance rises, not as a thought but as a sensation, a tightening in the chest, a familiar heaviness behind the ribs, a subtle pull back into who you used to be. Most people assume this feeling is intuition, or fear, or lack of motivation. It is. It's the gravitational pull of the old identity, the self you've been rehearsing for years, trying to keep you inside the frequency it understands. Your old identity isn't just a psychological pattern. It's a vibrational imprint stored in your nervous system, reinforced by repetition, held together by memory, emotion, and survival wiring. And the moment you try to flip the internal switch into a new frequency, that imprint reacts, not because it hates change, but because it fears losing control of the timeline you've been unconsciously maintaining. Think of your identity as a constellation of emotions, beliefs, and physiological reactions that your body has learned to predict. Your brain loves prediction more than it loves happiness. It prefers the familiar chemical cocktail of old emotions, even if they sabotage your growth. When you step toward a new reality, abundance, love, expansion, your old identity interprets it as instability. It doesn't trust possibility. It trusts what it already knows. So it begins pulling you back into old emotional signatures, the same doubts, the same protective thoughts, the same bodily tension that you've carried for years. Not because you're failing, but because your system has been trained to keep you aligned with the past rather than the future. Your old identity doesn't chase your desires, it chases safety, and safety is always found in the known. This is why people repeat the same emotional cycles even after reading dozens of books, watching countless videos, journaling, meditating, visualizing. The loops aren't mental, they're physiological. The body holds the past like a voltage, and that voltage keeps turning the switch back to its old position. You might mentally decide to embody abundance, but if your heart is still broadcasting contraction, the switch flips back. You might choose to move toward a new relationship, but if your nervous system associates love with danger, the switch flips back. You might try to manifest a new timeline, but if your identity still sees itself through the lens of limitation, the switch flips back. And every time it happens, you tell yourself a story that isn't true. I'm blocked. I'm stuck. I'm doing something wrong. But the truth is far more empowering. You're not blocked. You're entangled with an older version of yourself that hasn't been updated yet. In quantum terms, entanglement means systems remain connected and influence each other instantaneously, regardless of distance. Your old identity is one of those entangled systems. Even as you reach for new realities, the emotional residue of your past is influencing the signal you send to the field. This is why growth feels like a tug of war. You're not just creating a new you, you're disentangling from the previous one. And that disentanglement is both the most challenging and the most liberating part of quantum manifestation. Because once the emotional tie to the old identity dissolves, the switch no longer flips back. The new state becomes the default, the baseline, the home frequency, and manifestation becomes automatic because the field finally receives a stable, coherent signal instead of a fractured one. To understand how this works, imagine two tuning forks placed side by side. Strike one and the other vibrates sympathetically. Your consciousness works the same way. When you try to activate a new signal, confidence, abundance, clarity, the tuning fork of your future self begins to vibrate. But if the tuning fork of your past is louder, older, or more familiar, it will pull you back into resonance with it. The body vibrates according to the frequency it has practiced most. That's the real reason change feels difficult, not because the new timeline is far away, but because the old timeline is still loud, and the internal switch keeps defaulting to the signal with the greatest emotional charge. Here's the twist. Emotional charge isn't determined by intensity, but by repetition. A mild emotion repeated for years is more powerful than an intense emotion felt once. This is why long-term insecurity overrides short-term inspiration, why familiar doubt overrides new confidence, why a lifetime of survival mode overrides a single moment of expansion. Your old identity has simply been broadcasting longer, and the field mirrors it back because the field is literal. It doesn't interpret or negotiate. It responds to coherence, consistency, and vibrational truth. But here, where your power returns. The moment you become aware of the old identity's pull, the cycle begins to break. Awareness disrupts autopilot. When you notice the inner contraction, the emotional flood, the mental story that says, "Stay where you are," you are seeing the old identity in action. You are witnessing the moment the switch tries to snap back. And witnessing gives you choice. Choice is the beginning of coherence. Coherence is the beginning of a new signal. And a new signal is the beginning of a new timeline. So let's anchor something now because it will shift the energy of your entire transformation. Type in the comments, "I choose the new signal." This isn't just a comment. It's a micro-declaration, a physical action that anchors the new identity in the field. When thousands of people repeat the same phrase, it creates a collective resonance, a community-level coherence that amplifies your own. You are not commenting to please the algorithm. You are aligning yourself with the version of you who is no longer negotiating with the past. What comes next is the pivotal turning point of this journey. Because once you understand how the old identity keeps reclaiming the switch, you can finally take back control of it. In the next part, I'll show you the quantum shortcut. The method that flips the switch into coherence and keeps it there, not through effort but through alignment, not through mental force but through embodied resonance. And for the first time, your external reality will have no choice but to follow. The moment you understand that your reality has been shaped not by what you want, but by what you consistently embody, the entire game of manifestation changes. Most people believe they need to chase a new future, visualize harder, force themselves into positivity, or reprogram their mind through endless repetition. But the quantum doesn't respond to effort. It responds to order, and order is what coherence truly is. When your thoughts move in one direction, your emotions in another, and your body in yet another, your signal becomes scrambled. The field mirrors that scramble back to you through mixed results, delays, and contradictions. But when mind, emotion, identity, and physiology align, even briefly, the field receives a clear instruction. That moment of alignment is the quantum shortcut. That is the switch flipping. And once flipped, reality reorganizes around the new signal with surprising speed. To understand how to flip this switch intentionally, you need to see coherence not as a spiritual ideal, but as a measurable biological and energetic phenomenon. Heart-brain coherence, for example, is not metaphorical. Your heart produces an electromagnetic field far stronger than your brain's core. And when the heart enters a state of emotional clarity, gratitude, openness, presence, its rhythm becomes ordered. That ordered rhythm influences the brain, synchronizing neural oscillations. When the two systems lock into harmony, they create a stable frequency that expands through the body and outward into the environment. Scientists can record this shift. Spiritual traditions have taught it for centuries. And the quantum field responds to the unified signal because coherence is the vibration of clarity, and clarity collapses probability with precision. But coherence isn't achieved by thinking about coherence. You can't mentally command your heart to soften or your nervous system to relax. Instead, coherence emerges when you choose an internal state that carries no resistance. Resistance is the friction that fractures your frequency. When you try to manifest from stress, force, or desperation, the body constricts and the signal collapses into incoherence. That's why you can spend hours visualizing your dream life and still feel stuck. You're trying to build a new timeline from a constricted state. You're sending two signals at once, the intention of expansion and the vibration of contraction. The field reads the contraction. The quantum shortcut, then, begins with removing resistance, not by eliminating fear, but by shifting the emotional climate in which your intention lives. The fastest way to reduce resistance is to interrupt the emotional momentum of the old identity. Every identity is built on a rhythm, patterns of breath, patterns of tension, patterns of emotion. Those rhythms generate predictable signals. So when you take a slow, intentional breath, you are not just breathing. You are disrupting a vibrational pattern. When you relax your shoulders or soften your jaw, you are not just releasing tension. You are altering the energetic structure that holds the old reality in place. When you place your hand over your heart, you send sensory feedback to the vagus nerve, shifting your physiology toward safety. Safety dissolves resistance, and without resistance, the switch can flip. But breath and relaxation are only the doorway. The real flip happens when you embody the emotional signature of the reality you want before it arrives, not through pretending, not through forcing, but through resonance. The nervous system cannot distinguish between an emotion imagined vividly and an emotion created by real experience. If you generate the feeling state of the timeline you desire, peace, expansion, abundance, ease, the body begins to believe it. Once the body believes it, the identity adjusts. Once the identity adjusts, the signal stabilizes. And once the signal stabilizes, the field begins collapsing events around that frequency automatically. This is why Neville Goddard taught the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not because feeling makes the universe obey you, but because the feeling shifts your biology into coherence with the desired timeline. Here's the part most people overlook. The switch doesn't flip through dramatic emotional intensity. It flips through consistency of state. You don't need to feel powerful for an hour. You need to feel aligned for a moment. A single moment of genuine coherence sends a signal stronger than a month of stressed intention. In that moment, the whole system harmonizes: heart, brain, identity, breath, field. This alignment creates a vibrational lock that the quantum field responds to quickly. Manifestation appears faster not because you forced the outcome, but because you finally sent a signal the field could read clearly. And when the field receives clarity, it organizes reality with remarkable speed and accuracy. But flipping the switch requires one more thing: releasing attachment to how the new reality should arrive. Attachment is a subtle form of resistance disguised as desire. When you try to control the path, you contract your frequency. When you contract your frequency, the switch slips back. That's why letting go is such a crucial part of manifestation. Letting go is not giving up. It is stepping out of resistance so the field can do what the field does best: reorganize probability around your internal state. When you hold the internal state but release the external pressure, the switch remains in the new position long enough to generate tangible shifts. Let's make this practical. The switch flips the moment your inner experience becomes more coherent than your old conditioning. You don't need to fight the old identity. You don't need to destroy it. You simply need to generate a new stable frequency long enough for the body to realize it's safe to remain there. Every breath that invites safety, every moment of genuine gratitude, every second of embodied presence contributes to tuning your signal. And once the body recognizes the new frequency as familiar, it becomes the new baseline. That's when manifestation becomes effortless. That's when the field begins responding automatically. That's when the switch stays on. In the next section, we'll step into the part most people never reach: the moment when the new signal becomes not something you practice, but something you are. Because when you change the observer, you don't just shift your internal world, you shift the reality that forms around you. When the internal switch settles into a new position, something remarkable begins to happen. The world doesn't change all at once, and yet it does. The air feels different. People respond differently. Opportunities that used to slip through your fingers begin to hold their shape. The same streets look unfamiliar, as if the world is leaning in to meet you halfway. This is the quiet revolution that unfolds when the observer within you shifts. Reality doesn't transform through sudden flashes of magic. It transforms through a steady reorganization around your new frequency. And the more coherent your internal state becomes, the more naturally the external world aligns with it. You start noticing that old reactions simply don't activate anymore. The survival emotions that once dictated your choices lose their power. You feel less triggered, less rushed, less entangled in the noise of the past. This is not self-control. This is vibrational truth stabilizing inside you. When the body recognizes a new emotional baseline as familiar, it stops dragging you back into old cycles. The switch stays aligned because the old identity no longer has the authority to reset it. You're no longer living from memory. You're living from intention embodied as presence. And presence is the birthplace of all coherent manifestation. The field responds to this effortlessly. You'll notice synchronicities that feel too precise to be random, as if life has started speaking in a language you were always meant to understand. People show up at the right time. Solutions emerge before the problem fully forms. Ideas feel guided instead of forced. This isn't luck or coincidence. It's physics and consciousness dancing in harmony. You've stopped sending contradictory signals. You've stopped collapsing timelines that belong to an older version of you. The quantum field finally has a clear message to mirror back, and it responds with elegance because clarity is irresistible to the field. When your signal is coherent, reality aligns with it like metal filings arranging themselves around a magnet. Most people think change happens when they achieve something new. But the deepest transformations happen when something inside them no longer resonates with who they used to be. The old emotional signatures dissolve, not because you fought them, but because you outgrew them vibrationally. That is the true quantum shift, a version of you that can no longer fit inside the life you lived before. And once that happens, you're not chasing manifestations anymore. They gravitate toward you because you've become the kind of observer the field can trust. It doesn't need convincing or begging or endless repetition. It responds to who you are being now. This is the moment where your future self stops feeling like a distant possibility and starts feeling like the natural continuation of who you are. You begin to sense that the timeline you desire isn't somewhere ahead of you. It exists alongside you, parallel, accessible, waiting to be stabilized through coherence. And the more fully you inhabit the internal state of the person who already lives that reality, the more the external world reorganizes itself to match. This is why manifestation becomes automatic, not because the universe suddenly favors you, but because you've tuned yourself to the frequency that naturally harmonizes with the life you're calling in. As you ground into this new identity, something deeper awakens, a quiet sense of belonging to a reality that once felt distant or unreachable. You're no longer forcing change, you're receiving it. You're no longer imagining possibilities, you're inhabiting them. At a cellular level, you understand that your internal state is not a reaction to the world, it's a command to it. And when you live from that truth, creation becomes an extension of your presence. Life begins moving with you instead of around you. The field responds to your coherence with the same consistency you offer it. This is the foundation of effortless manifestation. A stable observer, a steady signal, a coherent identity, and the willingness to allow reality to rearrange itself around who you choose to be. Before we close, let this sink deeper than logic. You didn't arrive here to try harder. You came here because you're ready to resonate. You're ready to stop negotiating with your past and start aligning with your future. The switch is internal, yes, but the transformation that follows is universal. And once this internal shift becomes your new normal, everything you've been trying to attract begins moving toward you with clarity and purpose. Not because you asked more intensely, but because you finally became the version of yourself the field was always ready to respond to. If you feel called to go deeper, to understand the mechanics, the practices, the identity shifts, and the energetic alignments that make this transformation sustainable, there is a path curated specifically for this stage of your journey. It lives inside the Awaken Your Quantum Power ebook, along with its practical companion guide. This isn't a casual read. It's a structured immersion designed to amplify your coherence, stabilize your new frequency, and help you collapse timelines that no longer serve you. You'll find the link waiting for you in the pinned comment. Follow that pull. Your next level is already active. All that's left is for you to step into it.